Other recollections of my parents would not. My mother never seemed to do laundry, but my clothes were always clean and neatly folded. Forgotten permission slips for field trips to the zoo appeared in my desk when the teacher came to collect them. And no matter what condition my father's study was in when I went in for a goodnight kiss, and it usually looked as if something had exploded, it was always perfectly orderly. The next morning, in kindergarten, I asked my friend Amanda's mother why she bothered washing the dishes with soap and water when all you needed to do was stack them in the sink, snap your fingers, and whisper a few words. Mrs. Schmidt laughed at me at my strange idea of housework, but confusion had clouded her eyes. That night, my parents told me we had to be careful about how we spoke about magic and with whom we discussed it. Humans outnumbered us and found our power frightening, my mother explained. And fear was the strongest force on earth. I hadn't confessed at the time that magic, my mother's specialty, frightened me too. By day, my mother looked like every other kid's mother in Cambridge, slightly unkempt, a bit disorganized, and perpetually harassed by the pressures of home and office. Her blonde hair was fashionably tousled, even though the clothes she wore remained stuck in 1977, long billowy skirts, oversized pants and shirts, and men's vests and blazers she picked up in thrift stores, the length and breadth of Boston in imitation of Annie Hall. Nothing would have made you look twice if you passed her in the street or stood behind her in the supermarket. In the privacy of our home, with the curtains drawn and the door locked, my mother became someone else. Her movements were confident and sure, not rushed and hectic. Sometimes she even seemed to float. As she went around the house, singing and picking up stuffed animals and books, her face slowly transforming to something otherworldly and beautiful. When my mother was lit up with magic, you couldn't tear your eyes away from her. "Mommy's got a firecracker inside her," was the way my father explained it, with his wide, indulgent grin. But firecrackers, I learned, were not simply bright and lively. They were unpredictable, and they could startle and frighten you too. My father was at a lecture one night when my mother decided to clean the silver and became mesmerized by a bowl of water when she set it on the dining room table. As she stared at the glossy surface, it became covered with a fog that twisted itself into tiny, ghostly shapes. I gasped with delight as they grew, filling the room with fantastic beings. So they were crawling up the drapes and clinging to the ceiling. I cried out for my mother's help, but she remained intent on the water.